Coming up on Network Africa, U.S. President Donald Trump to skip this month's G20 summit in South Africa as President Cyril Ramaphosa seeks to discuss the inequality report. International NGO Water Aid releases new report which shows over 122 million people in Ghana, Niger, and Nigeria are living at high water risk. Plus, world's oldest president, Paul Biya, is sworn in for an 8th term in office in Cameroon. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Olarinde. South Africa's government says it has received distress calls from 17 of its citizens who have joined mercenary forces in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. According to government spokesperson Vincent Magwenya, the men aged between 20 and 39 were allegedly recruited under false promises of well-paid work. They are now trapped in Ukraine's war-torn Donbas region. President Cyril Ramaphosa has ordered an investigation into the circumstances that led to the recruitment of these young men. Working as a mercenary or fighting on behalf of another government is illegal in South Africa unless the government authorizes it. It's not clear which side of the conflict the South Africans were fighting for. 16 of the men are from KwaZulu-Natal and one is from the Eastern Cape. Analysts in the country say the high unemployment rate in South Africa make these young people vulnerable for such recruitment. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced he will not be attending the upcoming G20 summit in Johannesburg, saying South Africa no longer deserves a place in the group of major economies. He was speaking at the American Business Forum in Miami on Wednesday, saying South Africa shouldn't even be in the G's anymore. He says that he would not represent the U.S. at the meeting that's been set for November 22 to 23, but Vice President J.D. Vance will attend instead. Trump has been a vocal critic of South Africa's land reform policies, accusing the government of targeting white farmers and committing what he calls massive human rights violations. Earlier this year, he signed an executive order to cut U.S. aid to South Africa and to support the resettlement of white Afrikaners in the U.S., describing them as victims of unjust racial discrimination. Pretoria rejects these allegations, calling Mr. Trump's statements factually incorrect and based on a distorted view of the country's policies.
Miami has been a haven for those fleeing communist tyranny in South Africa. I mean, if you take a look at what's going on in parts of South Africa, look at South Africa, what's going on. Look at South America, what's going on. You know, I'm not going to, we have a G20 meeting in South Africa. South Africa shouldn't even be in the G's anymore, because what's happened there is bad. I'm not going. I told him I'm not going. I'm not going to represent our country there. It shouldn't be there.
In the meantime, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has received a G20 Global Inequalities Report. The report provides solutions and guidelines on how G20 countries should tackle inequalities. Professor Joseph Stiglitz handed over the report to the President in Parliament in Cape Town. President Ramaphosa says addressing inequality is an inescapable generational challenge. Our South Africa correspondent, Innocent Samosa, has more.
The G20 Global Inequality Report presented to President Cyril Ramaphosa by renowned economist Professor Joseph Stiglitz highlights growing disparities in income access to resources and opportunities across member states. It urges governments to adopt inclusive growth strategies, strengthen social safety nets, and ensure fair taxation systems to close the gap between the rich and the poor.
What we do in the report is, as I say, is try to draw upon the wide body of knowledge that has developed, talk about what are the multiple dimensions of inequality. It's not just income and wealth inequality, it affects health, It affects access to justice, education, every aspect of our lives. And what are the trends? What are the interrelationships between these various factors that are aspects of inequality?
President Ramaphosa says the report comes at a critical time as South Africa continues efforts to tackle poverty, unemployment, and inequality access to basic services. He says discussions with other G20 leaders will focus on translating the report's recommendations into concrete global action.
And this is the first time that a report of this nature and on a matter so fundamental, so important to global stability and human progress is presented for consideration by the G20. It's not that South Africa wanted to shock and awe other members of the G20, but we wanted this matter to be addressed because it is important. For inequality does not only reside in South Africa, it's pervasive all over the world.
The report also emphasizes that addressing inequality is not only a moral obligation, but essential for sustainable economic growth and social stability. From Pretoria, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television News.
Over 122 million people in the three countries of Ghana, Niger and Nigeria are living in high water risk, facing ill health, insufficient harvest and dehydration. This is according to a new report released by international NGO Water Aid, published in partnership with Tree Aid. It's a first of its kind study at this scale, analyzing 12 years worth of satellite data from the three countries, exploring the link between deforestation and water insecurity. The report warns without urgent action to protect forests, water insecurity will only worsen as the effects of climate change like flooding and drought continue to take hold. Well, ahead of the COP30 summit taking place in Brazil, the organizations are calling on governments to integrate forest and water action into future climate finance pledges. Well, joining us now for more discussions is Justin Kojo. He is the lead researcher on this Water Aid report. He joins us now from Tamale in northern Ghana. Thank you for speaking to us on Network Africa.
Hi, thank you very much for having me, and hello to your viewers as well.
Well, Justin, this report says over 122 million people across Ghana, Niger and Nigeria in this West African region are living in high water risk. What does that actually mean for people on the ground?
Yes, so it's not just the statistics. 122 million people living in areas classified as high water risk means that either they are living in places where there is no open water surfaces for them to depend on at all, or the water that is available is of poor quality and risky to be used. So 122 million people right now are living across the three regions in Niger, in Ghana, and in Nigeria, in these kinds of environments where they have to suffer with high water stress and also poor water quality wherever they are.
Now, your study links deforestation directly to water insecurity. Can you, explain how cutting down trees ends up affecting people's access to clean water?
Absolutely. So vegetation right now in our ecosystem is functioning as a filtration system or a sponge, if you like. Right now, when the rain falls, you find that the vegetation filters the rainwater that is running into our rivers by removing some of the soil particles, by removing microplastics and other chemicals it might carry along with it. But now, if you cut away trees and remove the vegetation off the surface of the earth, what you're going to have is this water is going to run freely, uninhibited by any vegetation, which means now it can carry soil particles, now it can carry microplastics, and it can carry bioorganisms into the water surfaces. Our research is showing that we are getting high turbidity rates, which means that now you have a lot of soil particles in water bodies. And we also have high algal blooms, which means that now some of the water bodies are now developing a lot of the green stuff you would normally see on open water surfaces. These are called algal blooms. What it means is, because the vegetation has been removed from the surface of the earth, this process is going to continue. The research shows that over the past 12 years, deforestation rates have been increasing across the three countries significantly. For instance, in Nigeria, over 27,000 hectares of land of vegetation has been destroyed in the past 12 years alone. So it means that we need to start thinking about reversing this process.
And which communities or areas did you find to be the most affected, and particularly the kind of human impacts that you've seen over the years on health, farming, and even daily life?
So for Nigeria, for example, some of the regions that were classified as high risk zones were, for instance, in the Oyo, the Osun, and the Ogun areas. These are areas that were having high water stress. It means there are very little open water surfaces for them to depend on, which means they will have to depend on secondary water sources like underground waters and water transported across pipes. Also, they have high algal blooms. The water surfaces available there tend to have these green stuff growing in them, which means now they are exposed to a lot of waterborne diseases like malaria, typhoid, cholera, and even potentially malaria, since mosquitoes generally like to breed around these kinds of water surfaces. Now, government have to spend extra money to treat these water bodies, assuming they are being treated properly. It means that you need to also start to consider extra measures to make sure that the water people end up consuming is safe for drinking or for farming or cooking.
Well, let's talk about solutions now. You're calling on governments to, integrate forest and water action into climate pledges, and this is ahead of COP30 that will be happening soon in this month. What specific actions or policies would you like to see? So
the research right now, from our proposal, we are proposing that it's time for government to start seeing these two situations as one. For instance, you should not treat vegetation as a standalone issue and treat water as a standalone issue. They are two sides of the same coin. It's time to start looking at them as one and start unifying them in our frameworks. WaterAid and TreeAid have commissioned this project to be able to use it to advocate for more inclusion of vegetation and water in climate financing, as well as pushing for governments to basically start delivering on some of their targets or various targets. For instance, in Nigeria, there are many targets the government has set for forest, vegetation, and also for water. It's time to start delivering on those. There are some areas that need to be protected. For instance, you find some large area of vegetation that is protecting some water basins like rivers. And once you cut them down, then you see that the river that used to flow throughout the year now gets dry before the year ends. So it's time to start protecting these together as one.
All right, then, Justin Kojo, lead researcher on the WaterAid report. Thank you so much for speaking to us on Network Africa.
Thank you very much.
Well, to politics now. Cameroon's 92-year-old leader, Paul Biya, has been sworn in for another 7 years as president in a ceremony that took place at the country's parliament in the capital, Yaoundé. He won a controversial 8th term in a fiercely disputed election last month, October. President Biya has been in power for 43 years and addressed only one campaign rally before the election. The nonagenarian, the world's oldest head of state, won 54% of the vote, compared to the 35% of opposition leader Issa Chiroma, and that's according to the official results released. Issa Chiroma maintains he was the rightful winner of the poll and has accused authorities of fraud, which they have denied. The announcement of the result led to major protests across the country. Well, let's take a break now on Network Africa. Still to come. The Lagos Fashion Week wins the Earthshot Award at the ceremony in Rio, Brazil. We'll give you more details after the break. Please join us again. Welcome back to the program. Nigeria's former permanent representative to the United Nations and the former president of the General Assembly, Professor Tijani Bande, says the UN as a body will not disintegrate or be replaced despite its many challenges. He made a statement in a speech at the Foreign Policy Lecture Series of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs in Lagos. Our correspondent Amarachi Ubani reports.
The Foreign Policy Lecture Series at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs this time focused on the topic, Relevance of the United Nations in World Order, by former Nigerian permanent representative to the United Nations and former president of the General Assembly, Professor Tijani Bande. Representing the NIIA Director General, Professor Hossa Sage, who is unavoidably absent, Research Fellow at the Institute, Professor Chinasa Ohiri, in her welcome remarks, highlights the question of the UN still shaping world order despite its many challenges.
The United Nations remains the cornerstone of multilateral diplomacy, and for Nigeria, it holds a special place in our foreign policy. Since joining the United Nations in 1960, Nigeria has been an active voice for peace, justice, and cooperation. We have proudly contributed to peacekeeping missions across Africa and beyond, championed the cause of developing nations, and consistently called for reforms of the United Nations General Security Council to make it more inclusive and representative.
Professor Tijani Bande, who is no stranger to the NIIA, eagerly delves into the topic. He makes a case for the UN being a supporter of human rights, decolonization, and admits the faults of the world body, saying that not every peacekeeping effort has worked, and how importantly the UN considers the voice of every member of the organization. While he underlines the peculiarity of the size of the organization, he encourages Nigeria to play her own role.
We should build on the record as Nigeria of looking after Africa's interests alongside its own, because this record is there. And we should look continually to do better in anchoring our diplomacy in Africa. We should, of course, prioritize relations with Guinea powers and blocs around them. However, as veteran of this, Nigeria must continue to stand on justice and fairness for all, especially those who are we shouldn't stand on nothing. We must stand on something. We believe our constitution is very clear on this as to who we should support.
During the question and answer segment, he addresses the alleged Christian genocide going on in Nigeria's north.
When somebody says Muslims are being killed by Christians in Nigeria, I say Muslims are killing Muslims, Christians are killing Christians, but they are not doing so in the name of any religion, as I understand. So the generosity of Nigerians alone should tell us that. But from outside, some people will want to make this noise. From others, some people want to be shown with some Congress people, haven't told them stories, not understanding the danger they put themselves under. After they finish using them, when they say, they don't even answer. I have seen it happen. So I think it's not a nice situation to be in. Let our diplomats deal with this matter.
Other participants agree with Professor Bande's submissions.
We should rather have our own conversation within ourselves. We should discuss how we can stop unreasonable killing and harassment and banditry and all of that. These are vices that we should stop. We don't need anybody to come and tell us from outside.
Of course, there are real concerns about insecurity in Nigeria. The whole world knows that. The question is, what are we going to do about that? And the Nigerian government needs to act and needs to be seen to act effectively and justly to ensure lasting peace in our country.
The topic is inexhaustible. 80 years of the existence of the United Nations may not be crammed into a 1-hour lecture, but the seeds have been sown for participants to look closely and meaningfully at an organization that has brought countries around the world under its umbrella. Amarachi Ubani, Channels Television News.
Well, Israel has confirmed Hamas handed over the remains of deceased Tanzanian hostage Joshua Molel on Wednesday under the U.S. brokered Gaza ceasefire deal. The Israeli Prime Minister's office said that following the completion of forensic tests at the National Center of Forensic Medicine, the Foreign Ministry had informed the 21-year-old student's family. Molel was undertaking an agricultural internship in southern Israel when Hamas-led gunmen attacked on 7th of October 2023. He was killed at the kibbutz Nahal Oz, and his body was then taken by fighters. His return means 6 deceased hostages, 5 Israelis and 1 Thai, are still in Gaza. The deputy leader of Tanzania's main opposition party, Chadema, is facing terrorism charges 2 weeks after his arrest in the capital, Dodoma. John H.'s lawyer says he's now being held in the main city, Dar es Salaam, where he was informed of the charges. It's unclear when he will appear in court. Well, he was arrested ahead of last week's elections, denounced by the opposition as a sham. President Samia Suluhu Hassan was sworn in on Monday after being declared the winner with 98% of the vote. Chadema's chairman, Tundu Lissu, remains in detention on treason charges. The elections were marred by widespread protests and deadly violence, with observers saying they fell short of democratic standards. Well, Nigeria's Lagos Fashion Week has won an award at the annual Earth Short Awards ceremony, which held in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The category 1 is the Build a Waste-Free World. The Lagos Fashion Week was awarded for its transformation of the world's most wasteful industry by creating a new fashion economy. Brazilian and foreign celebrities joined Britain's Prince William in Rio at the event to announce the winners of this year's Environmental Earth Short Prize. It was launched in 2020 by the heir to the British throne, together with biologist and natural historian David Attenborough. It recognizes environmental innovators. And as we end the program today, here's our fun fact about the continent. Did you know that in Mauritius, sugarcane is used to produce electricity on the island? The fibrous byproduct of sugarcane, called bagasse, produces electricity primarily during the harvest season. This bagasse is burned in thermal power stations to generate steam, which then drives turbines to produce electricity, supplementing the island's energy needs and reducing its reliance on fossil fuels like coal. And that's it on the program for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde.